Hi, I'm Dr. K. Yadav, Professor and Principal, Rajiv Gandhi College of Pharmacy, Bhopal, with another interesting and learning episode of B.Pharma on the important unit of pilot plant scale-up techniques, which is a very important unit of the section of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Technology 6th semester. Let's start our episode while taking a look at what we are going to learn today. There are 6 modules of all. Module 1 is Introduction to Pilot Plant Scale-up Studies. Module 2 is Reporting Responsibilities and Personnel Requirements. Module 3 is Space Requirements. Module 4 deals with review of the formula, processing equipments and process evaluation. The Module 5 will deal with production rates, master manufacturing procedures and GMP considerations. The last module will deal with transfer of analytical method to QA. Module 1 Introduction to Pilot Plant Scale-up Studies. Let's start with general introduction about the pilot plant. After a formulator has developed a lab scale product or a process, the next step before a full-scale production is a pilot plant batch. The purpose of the pilot plant batch is to confirm that the data, information and observations obtained from the smaller lab scale batches are reproducible in a larger scale manufacturing. Hence, a pilot batch is an intermediate batch which allows possibility of including any changes to the formulation or process before a full-scale production starts. In a pilot plant scale-up technique, a formula is analyzed and transferred into the most suitable formulation by the development of a reliable and practical method of manufacturing. This allows an orderly transition from laboratory to routine processing in a large-scale production facility. Moreover, allows to conduct relevant information during scaling up the experimental formulation from laboratory through pilot and finally to the production scale. Point to remember is that pilot plant is a part of the pharmaceutical industry where a lab scale formula is transformed into a viable product by development of a reliable and a practical procedure for manufacture that affects the orderly transition from laboratory to routine processing in a full-scale production facility. You can see on your screen the correlation of pilot plant with R&D and production. Position of a pilot plant in the industry. After having a brief idea about pilot plant studies, let us understand that it is this stage where a close examination of the formula is done to determine its ability to withstand the batch scale and process modification. It then reviews a range of relevant practicing equipments that determines the most simple, economical, reliable and compatible equipment during the processing. It allows checking of the availability of the raw materials which is consistently met the specifications. It is during this time that the actual production rates and their relationship to the immediate and the future market requirements are analyzed. The physical space required and the layout of related functions is taken into consideration to provide short-term and long-term efficiencies. For a successful product scale-up, critical steps such as training and reporting responsibilities are also identified. During the scale-up, efforts in the pilot plant, production and process controls are evaluated, validated and finalized. To provide the historical development of the production formulation, all the records and reports are issued to support the good manufacturing practices, that is the GMP, during the actual production. Pilot plant scale-up studies allows only those procedures to be developed and validated that are useful. It is during this time that all the critical factors are identified, checked and recorded to provide assurance that the process is under control, and finally leads to a product produced at each level of the scale-up to maintain the specified attributes which were originally intended. A pilot plant allows investigation of a product and process on an intermediate scale before large amount of money are committed to full-scale production. It is usually not possible to predict the effects of a many-fold increase in the scale. It reduces the risk associated with the construction of full-scale plant, and in the process only less capital is required. Hope this lecture is enhancing your basics about the pilot plant, and now we will move on to the next module with more details on the pilot plant, and you will learn more interesting facts and details. Module 2 is Reporting Responsibilities and Personal Requirements. Reporting responsibilities. It is very interesting to note that the question of who should be responsible for pilot plant studies has been debated with no clear resolution. Deciding such responsibilities depends upon the management philosophy, company's products, and background of the company's personnel involved. Let me make it simple and inform you that the scenario can be just understood in three types of setup. The first setup, where the pilot plant is a part of R&D group. The second setup, where the pilot plant is separated from the R&D. And the third setup, where the pilot plant is composite of both. In the first setup, where the pilot plant as a part of R&D group, in this type of setup, the pilot plant functions can be a part of research and development, that is the R&D group, with separate staffing. This type of arrangement provides a hierarchy of responsibilities to scale up formulations that have been developed by other formulators of R&D. This provides an opportunity for the critical analysis of formulations function. The formulators who develop the product can also provide support even after the formula has been transferred to the production. If the pilot plant is a research responsibility, greater consideration is given to the pre-formulation and formulation experiences observed in the initial development of a particular drug and its dosage form. Coming to the second setup, where the pilot plant is separated from the R&D. Some companies prefer to have a pilot plant group organizationally separated from the R&D. They report to the operation sides of the business. In some companies, they are the technology transfer people. The advantages of such setup is that such a group would be more pragmatic and more receptive to the operations priorities. The final setup, known as the third setup, is pilot plant as a composite of both. Some companies have adopted a composite of both the approaches for achieving the best attributes of both the research and development and the operations-oriented systems. Hope this episode is quite informative and you have understood that the effectiveness of the pilot plant is determined by the ease with which new products or processes are brought into routine production. This can be achieved if a good relationship exists between the pilot plant group and other groups, which are processing, packaging, engineering, quality assurance, quality control, regulatory, and marketing. Next section is personal requirements. Scientists with experience in pilot plant operations as well as actual production areas are the most preferred, as they have to understand the intent of the formulator as well as to understand the perspectives of the production personnel. The group should have some personnel with engineering knowledge as well as scale-up also involves engineering principles. If we consider the educational background of the pilot plant personnel, they should possess the knowledge of physicochemical factors which could adversely affect the bioavailability of the drug components from the tablet dosage forms. An individual with graduate training in industrial pharmacy is well qualified for such a responsibility. Mechanical and chemical engineering would be advantageous in the selection of new equipment offerings and in the organization of most economical sequences of unit operations. In addition, good communication skills, both oral and written, are essential because these individuals must frequently interact with members of the pharmaceutical research and production divisions. Access to the engineering department personnel is provided for equipment installation, maintenance, and repair. Members of the production and quality control divisions can readily observe scale-up runs. Dear friends, up till now you have gained a complete idea about the basics of the pilot plant reporting, responsibilities in a pilot plant and personal requirements. If you have missed any of the modules or content, you may log on to our website www.cec.nic.in to download a video, FAQs, LOR and other contents so that you can remain updated with this chapter. Now let's move ahead to our next module, that is about the space requirements for a pilot plant. Module 3, Space Requirements. The pilot plant design should be according to the current good manufacturing practices, that is the CGMP norms. The layout should be according to the needs of the flexibility in terms of portable equipments installed, use of the multi-purpose rooms. It should have restricted access and a well-planned system for personnel flow and material flow. The facility and equipment should be able to capture critical processes information. Intermediate sized and full-scale production equipments should be available in order to evaluate the effect of scale-up of research formulations. Adequate space is required to carry out each function smoothly. For example, cleaning of the pilot plant equipments. The final design should also result in a facility that supports the key strategic objectives and should have low maintenance and operation costs. Space requirements is divided into 4 areas. You may see on your screen, which is divided into administration and information processing area, physical testing area, standard pilot plant equipment area, floor space, and the last storage area. Administration and information processing. Adequate office and desk space should be provided for both scientific and technicians. The space should be adjacent to the working areas but sufficiently isolated to permit the people to work without any distractions. There should be space for computer, terminal for data entry, and archives for stability data protocols and historical files. Second is the physical testing area. This area should provide the permanent benchtop space for routinely used physical testing equipments. And the standard pilot plant equipment floor space. Discrete pilot plant space where the equipments needed for the manufacturing all types of dosage forms is located for the intermediate sized and full sized production equipments. This is essential in evaluating the effectiveness of the scale-up of research formulations and processes. Equipments used should be made portable wherever it is possible, so that after use it can be stored to the small storeroom. Spaces for cleaning of the equipment should be also provided. Storage area. It should have 2 areas divided as approved and unapproved areas for active ingredients as well as excipient. Different areas should be provided for the storage of the in-process materials, finished bulk products, and from the pilot plant is materials from the experiments, scale-up batches made in the production. Storage area for the packaging materials should also be provided. Module 4. Review of the formula, processing equipments, and process evaluation. Review of the formula. A thorough review of each aspect of the formulation is important. The purpose of each ingredient and its contribution to the final product manufactured on the small-scale laboratory equipment should be understood. Then the effect of the scale-up using equipments that may be subjected to the product stresses of the different types and degrees can be more readily be predicted or recognized. Raw materials. One purpose or the responsibility of the pilot plant is that the approval and validation of the active ingredient and excipients for the raw materials. This is a very critical step because the raw materials used in the small scale production cannot necessarily be the representative for the large scale production. It is important to note that although all of the analytical specifications may be met for the active pharmaceutical ingredient, which is the API, from the different suppliers, they may change in the particle size, shape, morphology, resulting in different handling properties. There also may be differences in bulk density, static changes, rate of solubility, flow properties, color, etc. At this stage, having alternate or multiple suppliers is very important. Processing equipments. The most economical and the simplest and efficient equipment which are capable of producing a product within the proposed specifications are used. The size of the equipment should be such that the experimental trials run should be relevant to the production size batches. If the equipment is too small and the processes developed will not scale up, whereas if the equipment is too big, then the wastage of the expensive active ingredients will happen. Processes evaluation. You can see on your screen the parameters which are included in process evaluations, which include the order of mixing of components, mixing speed, mixing time, rate of addition of granulating agent, solvents, solutions of drug, etc. Heating and cooling rates, filter sizes for the liquids, screen sizes for the solids, drying temperature and drying time. A question must be coming in your mind that why carry out process evaluation? The answer is that having knowledge of the effects of various processes parameters as few mentioned above forms the basis for the process optimization and validation. Before going to the next module, let us recap what topics we have learned today till now. Introduction to pilot plant scale-up studies, reporting responsibilities and personnel requirements in a pilot plant setup, space requirements. Then we have studied information on review of the formula, processing equipments and processes evaluation. Now we'll take a look at the production rates, master manufacturing procedures and GMP consideration. Module 5, production rates, master manufacturing procedures and GMP considerations. Production rates. The immediate as well as the future market trends or requirements are considered while determining the production rates. Equipments and the processes should be chosen on the basis of production of a batch at a frequently that takes into consideration the following 3 points. First is product loss in the equipment during manufacture. Point 2, the time required to clean the equipment between batches. And point 3, the number of batches that will needed to be tested for the release. Master manufacturing procedures. The 3 important aspects there are weigh sheet, processing directions and manufacturing procedure. The weigh sheet should clearly identify the chemicals required in a batch. To prevent confusion, the names and the identifying numbers for the ingredients should be used on batch records. The process directions should be precise and clear. A manufacturing procedure should be written by the actual operator. Various specifications like addition rates, mixing time, mixing speed, heating and cooling rates, temperature storing of the finished product. Samples should be maintained in the batch recording directions. Manufacturing directions should be in a language understandable by the operator, which is termed as Standard Operating Procedures, the SOPs. Batch records directions should be including the specifications for additional rates, mixing time, mixing speeds, heating and cooling rates and temperatures. Proper documentation should be carried out. Product stability. The primary objective of the pilot plant is the physical as well as chemical stability of the products. Hence, each pilot batch representing the final formulation and manufacturing procedure should be studied for the stability. Stability studies should be carried out in the finished packages as well. In GMP considerations, good manufacturing practices items that should be the part of scale-up are equipment qualification, process validation, regulatory schedule, preventive maintenance, regulatory process review and revalidation, relevant return standard operating procedures, the use of competent technically qualified personnel, adequate provision for training of personnel, a well-defined technology transfer system, and finally, validated cleaning procedures. Module 6. Transfer of analytical methods to QA. During scale-up of new products, the analytical test methods developed in the research must be transferred to QA department. In early transfer processes, this QA staff should review the processes to make sure that the proper analytical instrumentation is available and personnel are trained to perform the tests. If requires, assay method can be reformatted and be rewritten using the technology and procedures consistent with the current QA lab practices. To complete transfer, research personnel should review the assay procedure and the data obtained during the validation studies. Verify the analytical methods have not been altered in a way that might affect the reliability, precision, or accuracy of the tests. In summary, the pilot plant scale-up techniques is one of the most important tools for optimization of large-scale production, and it is a very important tool to transfer a process successfully from laboratory scale to full manufacturing scale. With all these information here, we come to end of today's lecture. Do keep in mind that what we have discussed today. Always keep time for self-study. This is Dr. Khushadov signing off. If you want to learn more and enhance your knowledge, you may log on to our website for MCQs, quizzes, LORs, www.cec.nic.in.